Bum 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 bum. How we doing? Audio good? Visuals good? Got should have 1080 here. Let me just lower the microphone. Or that's the camera. The microphone has the sound of the camera with the visuals. Hello, hello to LML's House of Oily Black Stone. Yes, nod to oily black beards. It's not too oily. Just a little bit of beard product in there. It's not overly oiled. In any case, hello, and I'd like to give a special welcome to those of you who have found the channel recently. A lot of you have come recently through the links from Unseen Westeros, who of course does all kinds of really cool artwork of Asshai and other remote places in A Song of Ice and Fire. They have been kind enough to reach out to me and partner with me a little bit. And so I used a ton of their artwork in the Great Empire of the Dawn video, and they linked to the Great Empire of the Dawn stuff from their site. They've got a whole bunch of new artwork coming out in the next couple months, and I have prepared new videos to go with the artwork. Oh yes, and I will tell you about that. They are Great Empire of the Dawn related. The first one, the big one, is Melisandre's Secrets, which is going to be about the secrets of the R'hllorys and the Shadowbinders, which both go back to Asshai, the Long Night, and our friend Azor Ahai and the Great Empire of the Dawn and all that stuff. Then I've also got kind of tangentially related two videos, shorter videos that will be coming out before that, before the big Melisandre episode. And those are both going to be Dany-centric episodes. I've got one about Dany using glass candles that Marwyn the Mage is almost certainly bringing her. And then I've got one about Dany potentially blowing the Dragonbinder horn, which is an idea I had kicked around in the back of my head vaguely, but I got to writing about it and found some new evidence for it. So I've got some cool Dany Dragonbinder stuff coming, some glass candle stuff. Basically, guys, Daenerys is going to be turning into a full-blown Valyrian sorceress before our eyes in the next two books. Minus the slavery, of course. As we've discussed many times, Dany is sort of an inversion and a course correction. Instead of a dragon lord who ends slaves, she's a dragon lord who frees the slaves. That's much nicer. So today, we are going to talk about the oily black stone and the fused black stone, but mainly the oily and greasy black stone. I did talk about some of this in the first two Great Empire of the Dawn videos, Dragon Lords of Ancient Asshai and Westeros. Mostly we talked about the fused stone, and we talked about the fused stone mostly in reference to Battle Isle and the Five Forts, because those two locations exist before Valyria and before the Long Night, for the best we can understand, right? And so the presence of fused stone, which to the best of our knowledge can only be made with dragon fire and sorcery, indicates that dragon lords were around making fused stone before the Long Night and before Valyria, and we've traced that back to Asshai. And so here we go. We've seen that Five Forts, which is inside the territory of the Great Empire of the Dawn, they're made of fused stone, and then all the way over in Battle Isle, we've got that fortress made of fused stone, and it's under the High Tower. And the High Tower supposedly was built, by the very first men that were there, probably before the Long Night. So it's very, very old, definitely pre-Valyrian, and we don't have really any evidence of Valyrian presence in Westeros. And yes, the birds are screaming. I'm going to turn the lights off in just a second. I just fed them, so yeah, 1 second. Just bear with me there with the background bird screaming. Oh, they're coming through loud, huh? Well, it's about that time. So I do have a bunch of cool quotes. Rhaegar's Reading Corner is not returning this week. It will be returning. Don't worry. Today, it's just going to be, I've decided to use the art, a bunch of the good art, to talk about the various locations we're going to visit today. But so first, I want to give an overview of where all the Blackstone is. And yeah, okay. Oh my God. I'm going to have to turn the bird light off. 1 second, guys. I was trying to just get through to a quote so I could go and turn them off when they did, but we are not even there. So 1 second, guys. Yeah, 1 second. Birds. All right. We'll just give that adjustment a moment to settle in. Oh, yes. Okay, so birds. Okay, so like I said, there's two substances here. That's the first thing I want to be very clear about. There's two kinds of black stone, and they appear to be mostly separate or completely separate. There might be a little bit of overlap, but for the most part, we've got two substances here, one of which we know more about than the other. So we've got the fused black stone, which, as I mentioned, is made through dragon fire and sorcery. That's what we're told. Basically, the dragon flame heats the stone to a molten state, and sorcery is used to shape, harden the stone in place, and then it looks like very cool dragons. So we see on Dragonstone, for example, the entrance to the Great Keep is a big dragon mouth. And of course, there's stone dragons all over the castle, on the walls, on the turrets, everywhere. So the whole thing is made of fused stone, which is made by Valyrian sorcery, essentially, dragons and magicians. And I've even pointed out in the past that it's likely that the Valyrians would have bred dragons for different purposes. Jorah mentions the Targaryen dragons being bred for war, and they certainly are war dragons from what we've seen. However, if you need to pave a road, I've pointed out that you'd want some calmer road paving dragons. Like, you wouldn't want Balerion the Black Dread. There was one dragon, I believe it was the Red Queen, Meleys, that essentially became more sedate when it didn't have to battle, and it got to sit around and get fed. It got kind of lazy, it got fat, it got content, and still was able to roust itself into a fierce battle, of course. But it gives us the clue that, like any animal, depending on how you treat it and how you breed it, it can turn out differently. And so if you think about the Valyrian roads, fused stone roads, wide enough, I think, for like 6 carts on each side to pass, so very wide roads. They span all of Essos, so hundreds and hundreds of miles, thousands of miles of Valyrian road. So you try to picture what the Valyrian road crew would have looked like, right? It's probably, like I said, dragons that are bred to be pretty tame. You'd want them to be controlled, very well trained on command, just the amount of flame at the, right where they need. Like, literally, there's a road crew. You have to picture this. I'm sorry, but George implied White Walker daycare, and he implied Valyrian road crews. So we've got to think about it. Like, think of Valyrian sorcerers and dragons just paving road all through Essos. So again, you'd want dragons that were bred to be more sedate, that could work with your road crews, that were well trained, not necessarily war dragons. So kind of a deviation there, but it's interesting to think about. So Valyrian fused stone, it can be found in the following places. Obviously, the Valyrian Empire, which is no more. All the Valyrian roads, which we just mentioned. Then there in Volantis, there's the Black Wall, which is basically a very tall inner wall that guards the inner city where the old blood lives, those who are descended from Valyria. And the top of the walls are wide enough to have horse races on. So literally, these are massive, massive walls that are tall and thick enough to, again, have horse races go around on top. So I picture Ben-Hur style collisions where the losers get knocked off the side of the wall or something, perhaps. In any case, there's also the Long Bridge in Volantis, all made of fused stone, all made by the Valyrians before they exited stage left from world history. Tyrosh, another city, another free city of Essos, which began as a Valyrian military colony, also has inner walls of fused black stone. And I'll point out that both Volantis and Tyrosh originally were built as military outposts that then turned into cities. So we have to think about basically the Phoenicians. That's the model here, where a colonizing empire sets up a fortress city outside of a land it wants to extract resources from and trade with. And so then later these military outposts turn into cities. But that's why there's these immense walls. It's like a military fortification on the inside. Dragonstone is similar. And I think the fused stone, as I start trying to get my glasses even here, these little things are kind of rickety. The fused stone fortress on Battle Isle strikes me as the same type of thing, just like Tyre or Sidon. Phoenician cities. It's a fortress built on an island just offshore. It's basically impregnable, and it's used to trade with and extract resources from the land, which does not belong to the people who built the fortress. So you see that model being copied with the Valyrians and even the Great Empire of the Dawn, again, going all the way back to Battle Isle. So Tyrosh, Volantis, Dragonstone began as a military outpost, and Battle Isle has all the markings of the same thing. So, and George, of course, includes nods to the Phoenicians when he talks about the purple dyes of the Bravosi and stuff. That's another Phoenician reference. So George is obviously very well familiar with European, Mediterranean, Middle Eastern world history. We find tons of references to it. So in any case, Dragonstone is more fused stone. There is also an abandoned fortress on Nath built by the Valyrians that's made of fused stone. Just a little trivia there. The Temple of the Lord of Light in Volantis might be fused stone. It is kind of not clear. It talks about the stone being there no seams, and it flows, and it looks like fire turned to stone. So it's very ambiguous, but it wouldn't surprise me if the Roloris had Valyrian dragon lords make them a grand temple in Volantis, one day back in the past. So I could see that being the case. Not really too important, neither here nor there. So, and then we've got, of course, the 5 forts and Battle Isle. Those are the ones that predate Valyrian. So everything that we just said is built by Valyria, and then the Battle Isle Fortress and the 5 forts, of course, seem to be from the Great Empire of the Dawn. There's all crackling and weird noises. Is anybody else having weird noises? Is there any sound issues? Just let me know, guys, if anybody else is hearing anything like that. So that is the fused stone. And the thing I want to emphasize is that we understand fused stone very well. The Valyrians made a ton of it. It was easy for them to do because they possessed dragons and the sorceress knowledge. So it looks like everybody's good. Okay, cool. Very good. Just want to make sure. Better safe than sorry. So the fused stone, we understand what it is. The oily stone, entirely another matter. It's very mysterious. It's definitely a Lovecraftian type of thing. It's straight out of the pages of Lovecraft, and it's tied into meteors and all kinds of things that we're going to get into. So the first place that we see the oily black stone is, of course, the Seastone Chair, right? And it happens in A Clash of Kings from a Theon chapter. And so I will go ahead and cue up our first quote. Right here. Even among the Ironborn, there are some who doubt this and acknowledge the more widely accepted view of an ancient descent from the first men. Even though the first men, unlike the later Andals, were never a seafaring people, certainly we cannot seriously accept the assertions of the Ironborn priests, who would have us believe that the Iron Men are closer kin to fish and merlings than the other races of mankind. Archmaester Hereg once advanced the interesting notion that the ancestors of the Ironborn came from some unknown land west of the Sunset Sea, citing the legend of the Seastone Chair. The throne of the Greyjoys, carved into the shape of a kraken from an oily black stone, was said to have been found by the first men when they first came to Old Wick. Hereg argued that the chair was the product of the first inhabitants of the islands, and only the later histories of maesters and septons alike began to claim that they were in fact descended of the first men. But this is the purest speculation, and in the end, Hereg himself dismissed the idea, and so must we. Yes, and so must we. There's no squishers at all involved here. No squishers. Yeah, so that is our introduction to this Seastone Chair. And there's a lot more. We get more of the same information in the World of Ice and Fire, which basically follows up on this idea and expands on it a little bit. So I will go ahead and pull that one up. How's the art coming through? Oh, actually, yeah, let me just tell you what art we just looked at. That was the Seastone Chair by Mark Simonetti. There's the Seastone Chair by Matt Brown coming up in the next one. There's Seastone Chair by Logan Feliciano. And there was a Balin Greyjoy in there by, that one's by R-Val, R-V-A-L-L-E. And then there was also a Dalton Greyjoy, and that was by Being Axel. So next up, we've got, like I said, from the world of Ice and Fire, more information about that freaky deaky Seastone Chair. If I could have one replica from A Song of Ice and Fire, by the way, guys, this would be it. A Seastone Chair in the living room. Oh, yes. Oh, wait. No. Even among the... No, that's the one we just did. Sorry. Technical difficulties. 1 second. Here we are. Number 3. Okay, so I'm just hitting the wrong buttons all over the place. Apologies, guys. Apologies. I do have this under control. I've done this before. Okay, maybe I did. Actually, I had the right one to begin with. Sorry. Even among the Ironborn, there are some who doubt this and acknowledge the more widely accepted view of an ancient descent from the First Men, even though the First Men, unlike the later Andals, were never a seafaring people. Certainly, we cannot seriously accept the assertions of the Ironborn priests, who would have us believe that the Iron Men are closer kin to fish and merlings than the other races of mankind. Archmaester Hereg once advanced the interesting notion that the ancestors of the Ironborn came from some unknown land west of the Sunset Sea, citing the legend of the Seastone Chair. The throne of the Greyjoys, carved into the shape of a kraken from an oily black stone, was said to have been found by the First Men when they first came to Old Wick. Hereg argued that the chair was the product of the first inhabitants of the islands, and only the later histories of maesters and septons alike began to claim that they were in fact descended of the First Men. But this is the purest speculation, and in the end, Hereg himself dismissed the idea, and so must we. So, super chats, questions. Are there any questions from the audience? One more time. Sorry, I've got a couple things going on in the background here that might be distracting me just a little bit. Is it this one? Lord Balin occupied the Seastone Chair, carved in the shape of a great kraken from an immense block of oily black stone. Legend said that the First Men had found it standing on the shore of Old Wick when they came to the Iron Islands. Okay, so now I understand what I did. I played the second Iron Islands quote from the World of Ice and Fire first, which is why I kept trying to play it again. Now, one way or the other, we have heard both quotes about the Seastone Chair. And so let's talk about what we've heard here. And also, like I mentioned, there was a couple more. No, I read off all the art. I got all the Seastone art. And by the way, all the names of the artists we'll add to the description following the video just to make sure that we've got those. So what the hell is this thing? It's very Lovecraftian. Obviously, it's carved into the shape of a kraken. So Cthulhu is very squid-like, obviously. So this is making us think of Lovecraftian. Lovecraft loves weird stone idols. We're going to talk about the Toadstone in a minute. He also has a couple stories with weird meteors that are magic and toxic and stuff like that, the color out of space, to name one. So, yeah, we're going to talk about we're going to talk about vitrified stone in a minute, Talk Studios. I'm getting to that. My plan is to sort of introduce all the spots, and then we'll get into what I think is going on here. The Seastone Chair, though, the interesting thing is that it's associated both times with stories about people who might have come to Westeros that we don't know about. Mysterious people that might have been on the Iron Islands before the First Men. We don't know if the Ironborn are First Men, et cetera, et cetera. So what we have here is a mystery. George is suggesting that potentially people were here on Westeros long in the past before, you know, beyond sort of outside the limits of memory and history. We already know this is true from the Great Empire of the Dawn, Fuse Stone Fortress on Old Town and House Dane and all that stuff. The Iron Islands are kind of in that same general part of Westeros, in that west coast, southwestern coast there. So it's potentially, this could be the Great Empire of the Dawn that we're talking about, or it could be the vanished race of squishers. There definitely are deep ones and aquatic humanoids in the backgrounds of A Song of Ice and Fire. There are enough of them for us to know that they exist. And we know that humans and those hybrid humanoid creatures can interbreed. The Children of the Forest have. There's all kinds of evidence of weird lizard humans going on in the Far East and in Sithorios. And then we have the Targaryens, who, of course, seem to have some sort of reptilian or lizard DNA inside them, because sometimes they pop out lizard babies, and that doesn't happen normally. So that is, we have to entertain the deep one possibility with the Oily Black Stone, as well as the Great Empire of the Dawn. That's the approximate lay of the land here. But this is definitely a mystery. I'll also point out that the Castle Pike was found in place by the First Men, potentially also. Nobody knows who built it, is what they say about Pike. And it's also built out of round towers, which supposedly the First Men didn't use round towers. So it seems to me like Pike is a castle built before, you know, a long damn time ago, before the Long Night. And that's why it's all collapsed. Probably the Long Night disaster is what collapsed the land around the Iron Islands and caused the partial collapse of the castle, and they've just been using it since then. So got a super chat here from Oasis Rules. Garth Greenhand planted weirwoods. The Grey King sat on the Seastone Chair. Could they both access the weirwood net? Could the Children of the Forest help? So the Seastone Chair does appear to have, or at least it could have, some magical properties. The Oily Black Stone in general seems to have magical properties. So there is an outside chance that there is untapped sorceress potential to the Seastone Chair. However, Euron Greyjoy does not seem to be overly fixated on it. And if it were a sorceress object that enabled him to do something as powerful as like Weirwood Net, astral travel, or some equivalent of it, then I think he would be sitting on the chair more often. So I tend to think the evidence is that Balon Greyjoy seems to be kind of decrepit. When Theon sees him, he's shocked by how much he's aged in only 10 years. And it could be that, if you think, we're going to get to Yeen and Asshai, but of course we know that there are toxic properties to the oily stone. So it could be that sitting on it every day for 20 years has made Balon kind of more haggard than he would be, but it's really neither here nor there. I'm not sure about that. And by the way, guys, if you're trying to get questions in, I will be taking more questions towards the back half. I've got some stuff I want to present here, but I will definitely open it up for questions and kooky theories on the Black Stone. It's definitely not something we can pin down completely. So, all right. So then we've got our next location is going to be Yeen. Oh, yes. Let me go see if I can calm the birds while I play this quote about Yeen. Some say that there were other races here, forgotten peoples, destroyed, devoured, or driven out by the brindled men. Tales of lizard men, lost cities, and eyeless cave dwellers are commonplace. No proof exists for any of these. Maesters and other scholars alike have puzzled over the greatest of the enigmas of Sithorios, the ancient city of Yeen. A ruin older than time, built of oily black stone in massive blocks so heavy that it would require a dozen elephants to move them. Yeen has remained a desolation for many thousands of years, yet the jungle that surrounds it on every side has scarce touched it. A city so evil that even the jungle will not enter, Nymeria is supposed to have said when she laid eyes on it, if the tales are true. Every attempt to rebuild or resettle Yeen has ended in horror. Spooky place, that Yeen, of course, everyone's favorite spooky place in A Song of Ice and Fire. That Yeen artwork, there was some by Tom Hebler. Those are the first couple of pictures. Those were from Unseen Westeros, by the way. Then there was Enrique Murguia, Yeen. That's the one that we zoomed in on with the black blocks and the people by the campfire. And then there was a really creepy last one at the end. Let's see. Let me see if I can find that. It's got a weird name. Let's see, 1 second. I will get it. I just want to give my artist credit, so let's not skimp on this here. It is... Good stuff, right? I feel lucky that we even have Yeen artwork at all. Such a weird place, but obviously it's inspired people to do it. That was from Chetan Biswas. That this really creepy one here. I'll put it up on the screen real quick. This one. It's got very glistening greenish black stone. I was very happy with the texture. So thanks, Mr. Chetan Biswas, for that one. All oilier stone. Thanks, chat. That's kind of chat content I expect. So what's up with this place? It's kind of like the lost colony of Roanoke. If you guys know your American history, it's a colony. By the way, I have played bass in a kind of, it was like 90s metal. It's not exactly metal, but we all had distortion pedals, so I'll give that. In any case, so we've got this, like I said, it's kind of like the lost colony of Roanoke in that Nymeria tried to establish a colony there, and they came back after a couple months, and everyone was just gone, and mysteriously. So eaten by the Shrikes or the lizard people or who knows what, the brindled men. But every attempt to resettle or rebuild Yeen has ended in horror, as we saw there. So the main thing about Yeen, there's two things I want to point out. One is that the jungle will not grow into the city. It stops right around the stone. And so this shows us that there is an inherent quality to the oily black stone that is inimical to life, inimical to plants and animals. And like I said, this may be why Baelin's sitting on the oily black stone Seastone Chair, maybe why he's prematurely hangered. Yes, Croatoan, the word that was written on the tree, the only clue about Roanoke. Yeah, it's a great mystery. So, yeah, okay, here we go. So I was just reading the Call of Cthulhu, and the stone from Relay was described as greenish black. So yeah, I definitely, when you say oily black stone, like think about the sheen of an oil slick. It's kind of greenish and sort of rainbow looking, but like with a greenish hue. So that's definitely the way I picture the oily black stone. And again, I'm going to get into theorizing about what it actually is. But first I want to identify it so we have all the facts about this stuff. And so the second thing I want to point out, besides the fact that it repels the plants in the jungle, is the size of the blocks, right? They're huge. What was the exact line here? It says, massive blocks so heavy that it would require a dozen elephants to move them. So we're about to read the description of Moat Cailin, a very similar description that we're going to hear. So essentially, these are, is there Quinn in the chat? Oh, look at that. Greenish black because it was underwater for millions of years. What's up there, Quinn? Drop it in the chat. What do you know? All right. So, yeah, and there's by the way, to understand the context of all the oily black stone, it's definitely a Lovecraft thing. Like I said, it's the oily black stone. It could be attached to the meteorite, so there could be an element of it coming from outer space, or it could be magic that came from outer space on the comet or on the meteors. And then, like we see, it's just inimical to life. It's something that doesn't belong. It's something that like literally pushes back the jungle and the nature. And we're going to get to Asshai, obviously. Some sort of catastrophe has happened at Asshai, which is obviously tied to the mystery of the oily black stone. So with that in mind, massive blocks so heavy would require a dozen elephants to move them. Let's listen to the description of Moat Cailin, which comes from A Dance with Dragons. Moat Cailin is a potential oily black stone site. It is not confirmed, but it is a potential. So listen to this and see what you think. Where once a mighty curtain wall had stood, only scattered stones remained, blocks of black basalt so large it must once have taken 100 men to hoist them into place. Some had sunk so deep into the bog that only a corner showed. Others lay strewn about like some god's abandoned toys, cracked and crumbling, spotted with lichen. Last night's rain had left the huge stones wet and glistening, and the morning sunlight made them look as if they were coated in some fine black oil. So that's interesting, right? It's ambiguous because we're told that these are blocks of black basalt. Basalt, of course, is a volcanic rock. It's a silicate rock. So this could be potentially, it's not a disqualifier is what I'm saying. The oily black stone could have started out as a natural stone like basalt, but then potentially have been modified by magical fire, meteor fire, magical meteor fire, and so on. So the idea that Moat Cailin is built out of black basalt doesn't mean that it's not oily black stone, but it's definitely raises a question here because it only looks oily as it's coated in the rain and being struck by the sunlight. So it could just be trick of the optical illusion. But why would George use those words if he didn't want us to think about places like Yeen when we look at Moat Cailin? And here's the thing about Moat Cailin. Moat Cailin is a mystery all on its own. It doesn't fit any of the First Men castles. It doesn't look, the First Men built these primitive ring forts, and they built kind of stumpy castles that basically got replaced by the more grand castles of the Andals, with the exception of a couple of magical locations, such as Storm's End and the Wall and things like, and the High Tower, perhaps. But bottom line is that this Moat Cailin doesn't belong, okay? And it's probably really frigging old. It's suffered some sort of great catastrophe, like something on the scale of a very large earthquake, or, of course, a meteor strike, or an earthquake brought on by a meteor strike, which is what happens, by the way. And so it's more than just the neck being flooded here. And obviously the Hammer of the Waters legend is attached to all of this. It's not just flooded, like these curtain walls are toppled. The blocks are strewn about the bog. So this was like something violent happened here. And again, these blocks are so big, they're enormous. So it's, again, Yeen is described as blocks so heavy it would require a dozen elephants to move them. And then here at Moat Cailin, it said it must have taken 100 men to hoist them into place. So 100 men, a dozen elephants, you get the idea. These are giant blocks. And in the next description we're going to read about Moat Cailin, it'll compare them to the size of a cottage. So cottage-size megalithic blocks are being stacked on top of one another to make a curtain wall as tall as Winterfell's, which means 80 feet. So this is an incredible megalithic construction. As many as 20 towers, this giant curtain wall. And here, another proof that it was built a long time ago is that you wouldn't build a place like this in a bog. You wouldn't, and you couldn't. You wouldn't be able to transport blocks this big into the swamp to build a castle there. And again, you think of Monty Python, like So I built a castle. That one sank into the swamp. So I built a second one. That one also sank into the swamp. So I built a third one. That one burned down, fell over, and then sank into the swamp. But the fourth one stayed up, lad. Anyways, so makes much more sense that Moat Cailin was built in the neck before it turned into a bog, when there was solid land to build on. Then something happened, the Hammer of the Waters, the Long Night, the Moon Meteor Flood. These are all the same event to me. And we have earthquakes happening, land subsidence, everything's collapsing, the water comes in. Now we have a swamp with an abandoned castle whose stones are way too friggin' big to have been put there by the first men. If the first men could build castles like Moat Cailin, we would see at least one other castle or wall or anything that looks like Moat Cailin. But there's nothing in Westeros that looks like Moat Cailin. I want to emphasize this. Moat Cailin does not belong, okay? It doesn't belong. It doesn't match anything in Westeros, but it sounds a goddamn lot like Yeen. The blocks are the same size. They're described as being square, and Yeen is built out of oily black stone in a swampy jungle, and Moat Cailin here is in a swamp. So that could be a potential link. And, you know, maybe the Squishers built both of them. I don't know. But I think what George wants to imply is basically just an older cycle of habitation, some mysterious people building stuff that are gone now. So I do think he wants to play with the idea of Squishers. And if Squishers are building anything, it's Yeen and Moat Cailin. Those are the two that I think they would have built if they did build anything. And in Lovecraft, deep ones can build. Is that not correct? I believe they can build. We might not think of like mermaids or mermans, you know, building stuff, but I believe they have in Lovecraftian lore. So, and they are also described as being big and strong. When you listen to Nimble Dick, they're supposed to be a little extra tall. So, no, so the base of the good question. There's a little bit of, so I've called the Battle Isle fused stone, and it's very clearly described as fused stone. There's a little bit of ambiguity though, because Archmaester Hereg, who wrote that book Strange Stone, said that Battle Isle reminded him of the Seastone Chair a little bit. So that introduces the idea that like maybe there's something in common between this fused stone fortress and the oily blackstone Seastone Chair. The fused stone fortress also weirdly has tunnels inside of it, which I think were probably just carved by the dragons who would have built the fortress, because we've seen that dragons tunnel into stone. Viserion does that in Meereen. But it is kind of weird, the tunnels. So maybe it's something that isn't, you know, Dragon Lord related. Maybe it's more Squisher related. But I think for the most part, Battle Isle appears to be fused stone, and therefore is somewhat different than the oily blackstone. But Asshai is going to mix all that up as well. So again, they're separate as an end result substance, but there may be some commonality or common origins between the fused stone and the oily stone. So, and Battle Isle is compared to Lorath because of the maze-like quality of those tunnels, but really they have nothing in common. Lorath is not made of fused stone. It's not made of black stone. Battle Isle is made of black fused stone. But the maze-like quality of the tunnels caused some people to wonder, because the maze makers are like the most hard-to-place, mysterious background story in the whole Song of Ice and Fire universe. They really are weird. I've connected them to Lang potentially, but that's just kind of a guess or a hypothesis, really. So, getting back to Moat Cailin, let me cue up this second Moat Cailin quote so we can get all the information. No, Lazar, I'm not mad at anybody. I'm going through notes and presented material, so I'm not reading the chat as much right now. But like I said, I'll open it up for questions near the end. So if you've got some questions you're trying to get through, just be patient. I'll get there. So here is the second Moat Cailin. Just beyond, through the mists, she glimpsed the walls and towers of Moat Cailin, or what remained of them. Immense blocks of black basalt, each as large as a crofter's cottage, lay scattered and tumbled like a child's wooden blocks, half sunk into the soft, boggy soil.
Nothing else remained of a curtain wall that had once stood as high as Winterfell's. The wooden keep was gone entirely, rotted away 1,000 years past, with not so much as a timber to mark where it had stood. All that was left of the great stronghold of the first men were 3 towers. 3 where there once had been 20, if the tale-tellers could be believed. The gatehouse tower looked sound enough, and even boasted a few feet of standing wall to either side of it. The drunkard's tower, off in the bog where the south and west walls had once met, leaned like a man about to spew a bellyful of wine into the gutter. And the tall, slender children's tower, where legend said the children of the forest had once called upon their nameless gods to send the hammer of the waters, had lost half its crown. It looked as if some great beast had taken a bite out of the crenellations along the tower top and spit the rubble across the bog. All 3 towers were green with moss. A tree was growing out between the stones on the north side of the gatehouse tower, its gnarled limbs festooned with ropey white blankets of ghost skin.
So that was some really great Moat Cailin art there that I just found last night. So let me tell you about that. Those 3 of the 3 towers at the end, those were by Dmitry Bilak, and that's Bielak, Dmitry Bilak. And he did those, like I said, Children's Tower, Drunkard's Tower, and the Gatehouse Tower. Then there was Moat Cailin by Francois Copolani. And there was also the black and white Moat Cailin by Ted Nasmith. And, of course, the Renee Agner with the famous Moat Cailin that we've all seen a bunch of times, with the black stone and the colorful swamp. And then there's also the very tall Moat Cailin, super tall, 3 towers. That one is by Mark Simonetti. There was also a black and white by Didier Graffet, or Graffet, probably Graffet. So there you go. There's our Moat Cailin art. So like I said, just to follow up on it, you can see the size of the blocks is emphasized, the way that they're flung and strewn all over the place. So this is, like I said, a big disaster has happened here. So I don't want to belabor it, but that's you guys get the point here. Let's see, is there anything else I wanted to point out from that? Oh yeah, well, the Hammer of the Waters part. So guys, if you're new to the channel, maybe you haven't heard this, but most of you guys know the Hammer of the Waters event, in my opinion, is a memory of one of the Long Night moon meteor impacts. Something hammered the land, which implies something heavy coming down and impacting, right? Even if you want to say hammers are made of iron, so are meteors, but really it's just the idea of something hammered the waters. Giants waking in the earth, that sounds like an earthquake. The earth, giants are awaking in the earth is shaking. But a hammer, it's a different matter. That sounds more like a meteor. And of course, one of the islands on the Stepstones, which is where the Hammer of the Waters supposedly fell and shattered the Arm of Dorne, is named Bloodstone. And we're going to talk about the Bloodstone Emperor and his meteor and what all that has to do with this very shortly. But that's a big clue that the Hammer of the Waters should be tied to the Long Night and all of those events. So I did a whole video live stream about that called The Pact and the Hammer of the Waters, one of my more successful live streams. So I recommend that one if you want to get my rundown on the hammer stuff. But that is why we have these memories of the hammer associated with Moat Cailin. And you'll notice that some people think there are 2 Hammers of the Waters events because we have this past. This is the only part where it's talking about Moat Cailin. And then somewhere else it says it was called down from the Isle of Faces. And we obviously know that the Arm of Dorne was broken by something that's remembered as the hammer. And then it's implied that perhaps the neck was shattered by a hammer too. But it wouldn't really make much sense for the Children of the Forest to gather in a tower of Moat Cailin and then call the hammer down on the neck where they were literally standing. If you're standing on the Isle of Faces and hammering the Arm of Dorne, at least you're far away from the blast site, right? So I think that essentially all of the Hammer of the Waters stories are intentionally confused because it's not really what happened. The Children of the Forest didn't drop the hammer. It was Azor Ahai, although he was messing with the Weirwoods, and so Weirwood magic is involved. That's the summary there. So So then we've got Isle of Toads. So bouncing back over to the Basilisk Islands, which is in Sothoryos, very close to Yeen. Yeen is in Sothoryos, down into the continent a little bit. Not too far, but the Basilisk Islands are just north of Sothoryos. And they've got a greasy black stone too, and it's a good one. It's only one piece of artwork for this. It's by Martin Mathis, and it is the Isle of Toads.
On the Isle of Toads can be found an ancient idol, a greasy black stone crudely carved into the semblance of a gigantic toad of malignant aspect, some 40 feet high. The people of this isle are believed by some to be descended from those who carved the toadstone, for there is an unpleasant fish-like aspect to their faces, and many have webbed hands and feet. If so, they are the sole surviving remnant of this forgotten race.
So here we have Martin intentionally conflating deep ones and oily stone here again. And thank you, Lauren, for the obligatory super chat of support. So the question begins arriving, where does this stone, where is it coming from? Where is it being quarried from? A 40-foot idol kind of sounds like the oily black stone is on the Isle of Toads to begin with, and they just carved it into a shape. This does not sound like they carried a 40-foot tall stone to the Isle of Toads and made it, right? So depending on what we think the oily black stone is, this raises some interesting questions. Why there is a giant stone in the basilisks? If this has to do with meteors, then obviously the meteors can get flung around. They can land. Usually when a large comet or meteor is entering our atmosphere, it's going to break up into multiple pieces, and there are going to be multiple impact zones spread out over a long line across the globe. That's what we're finding out with the Younger Dryas comet, the ongoing research with that. So now this this toad is a very direct reference to Lovecraft, and let's see. I thought I had this pulled up and ready to go. There's a write-up about this. There's a specific god of Lovecraft that has a toadstone idol, and Martin is essentially just using it here. He's borrowing it, and let's see here. I could have sworn I left it up so that I would have it to use today. Here we go. And it's from my good friend Silas Toms, who has the Gods of Terror blog, which I will link and drop in the chat. I highly recommend this to all you guys. You will enjoy it if you like my stuff. It's specifically focusing on some of the Lovecraft angles. And oh my God, I have too many windows open now. Where is my stream? Help. There it is. Okay. Sorry, guys. Trying to do a little more than usual today. So there's the link in the chats to Gods of Terror. It's just godsofterror.tumblr.com. And my friend Silas Toms informs us that the Isle of Toads, toadstone idol, it is it's probably pronounced Sithagwa. Sithagwa. And this is this is from The Mound by H.P. Lovecraft and Zelia Bishop. This was a squat plain temple of basalt blocks without a single carving and containing only a vacant onyx pedestal. It had been built in imitation of certain temples depicted in the vaults of Zin to house a very terrible black toad idol found in the red Litten world called Sithagwa in the Yothic manuscripts. It had been a potent and widely worshipped god, and after its adoption by the people of Qin Yan, had lent its name to the city which was later to become dominant in that region. Yothic legend said that it had come from a mysterious inner realm beneath the red Litten world, a black realm of peculiar sensed beings which had no light at all, but which had great civilizations and mighty gods before ever the reptilian quadrupeds of Yoth had come into being. So blah, 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 incomprehensible, amorphous, blasphemous beings. The toad idol is some sort of demon god, dark god, great old one, Lovecraftian, incomprehensible deity thing. That's what this is. So pretty consistently with the oily black stone, Martin is using it to channel the gods of Lovecraftian realm into A Song of Ice and Fire a little bit. It's mostly kind of on the fringes. I don't expect the toad idol to be important at the end of the story, but it's just kind of showing us that these forces are at the edges of reality. And it's possible that Euron, as I've said a few times, might be messing with forces he doesn't understand by using all this shade of the evening and stuff. Perhaps there's some sort of entity like dead Azor Ahai or dead Night's King out there in the astral realm that's going to take over Euron's mind in a sort of Lovecraftian fashion. This could be coming. So that is essentially what I have to say about the Isle of Toads. And of course, it's associated with fishy people. And as I've said now earlier, there are fishy people in A Song of Ice and Fire. I also don't think they'll be super important to the scheme of things, but they might have something to do with this oily stone. They could be the carvers or the builders of it. Perhaps they did it at the behest of the Great Empire of the Dawn. Imagine Bloodstone Emperor enslaving the Squishers or something like that. We're never going to get an answer on this kind of stuff. It's basically just, Martin giving us these dark possibilities and hoping that our imaginations run wild, which they are. Always with this topic. So then we've got, next up, our next oily blackstone location is, of course, the most important one, Asshai by the Shadow.
Easternmost and southernmost of the great cities of the world, the ancient port of Asshai stands at the end of a long wedge of land, on the point where the Jade Sea meets the Saffron Straits. Its origins are lost in the mists of time. Even the Asshai do not claim to know who built their city. They will say only that a city has stood here since the world began, and will stand here until it ends. Few places in the known world are as remote as Asshai, and fewer are as forbidding. Travelers tell us that the city is built entirely of black stone. Halls, hovels, temples, palaces, streets, walls, bazaars, all. Some say as well that the stone of Asshai has a greasy, unpleasant feel to it, that it seems to drink the light, dimming tapers and torches and hearth fires alike. The nights are very black in Asshai, all agree, and even the brightest days of summer are somehow gray and gloomy. Asshai is a large city, sprawling out for leagues on both banks of the Black River Ash. Behind its enormous land walls is ground enough for Volantis, Karth, and King's Landing to stand side by side and still have room for Old Town. An account by Archmaester Marwyn confirms reports that no man rides in Asshai, be he warrior, merchant, or prince. There are no horses in Asshai, no elephants, no mules, no donkeys, no zorses, no camels, no dogs. Such beasts, when they are brought here by ship, soon die. The malign influence of the ash and its polluted waters have been implicated, as it is well understood from Harmon's On Miasmas that animals are more sensitive to the foulness exuded by such waters, even without drinking them. Septon Barth's writings speculate more wildly, referring to the higher mysteries with little evidence.
Ah, geez. Mike is muted the whole time. I'm narrating all of this. Okay, so I was just telling you about the artists. Wouldn't be an LML stream without a super mute. That was a good one, though. Apologies, guys. So real quick, I was just telling you about the art. The one I put up on the screen was Jovan Delic, that really dark one of Asshai. That's the one I used for the Church of Starry Wisdom Church of Starry Wisdom live stream. So if you want any Church of Starry Wisdom info, that's Great Empire of the Dawn. It's in the Great Empire of the Dawn playlist. And then I also used Enrique Merguia's very tall picture of Asshai, which I'm a big fan of. That was this one. And this makes a nice slow vertical pan. Works really well with that one. But I love, you can see the creepy dim sunlight, and looks like the Church of the Lion of Night there. So pretty good stuff. Then we had also, let me just pop this one open. There was Marco Ayazi's Asshai from Unseen Westeros. And that one looks like this. That's that big wide shot. The dark, shadowy hills. You can see the Shadowlands. It's dim. All the stone is black. So that's a great one there. And of course, there's a whole bunch of more Asshai artwork coming from Unseen Westeros as well. So that's cool. And then I also used Renee Agner's swampy picture of Asshai with the buildings coming out of the water there. So thank you, artists, for yes, that was a bad mute because my chat wasn't caught up. It was back scrolled to the super chats, and so I wasn't seeing everybody. Anyways, sorry guys. Sorry those of you watching after the fact and just rolling your eyes at me. Yeah, it is what it is. So those super chats now, fuck, they've lost them. Man, it really doesn't store this chat for very long. Shit. Mods, can anybody scroll back and see there was two super chats? One was a good joke about how we're not gonna get a Varys squisher reveal in front of the Toadstone Isle. If anybody's a squisher in the story, I believe it is Biter. Biter. That's right. Not only are his teeth filed, but he's like too big, and he's got no hair, and his face is all weird. Like Brienne's punching it as hard as she can, and he's not flinching at all. And it feels like when she punches it, it feels like strange to her. Like, so I think Biter might be a Merling that Rorge found in the fighting pits over in Slaver's Bay. Apart from that, though, yeah, that was from Harrison Grand Williams. Thank you, Elisa. Yeah, no Varys Merling reveal. Thanks, Harrison. And then the other one was from... Who was the other one from? Let's see. Oh, Harangan Mind. Yes, Harangan Mind. By the way, Harangan Mind, I've got your email ready to read in a second. He's a geologist and sent me some stuff about vitrified stone, which I'm going to get into in a second. So he points out that the surface of the moon looks white to us, but is actually black as new asphalt and just very well lit. Could the oily black stone be moon pieces? So yeah, let's go ahead. Since we're at Asshai here, well, I want to play the other quotes first. But yes, they could be moon pieces. In my opinion, they are either pieces of moon, or there is a thing where when the meteor comes and hits the ground, it's essentially everything gets melted and combined, and there's a new substance created. The third possibility that's related is that the meteor is poison. It's landed in Stygi, and essentially the poison is leaking out into the entire peninsula. And so all the stone of the Shadowlands is turned into oily black stone by magic. And so you can mine a ton of it out of the Shadowlands and essentially carry it to Yeen by boat, build yourself, something there. Or it could be that the meteorites, wherever they land, they're going to begin creating oily black stone. So there might be Toad Island might have a meteorite that's created that idol, and then they cut off some blocks and carried it down to Yeen, or there could be another one in the jungle. Any of this would be realistic if we're dealing with some sort of meteor thing. Super chat for a super mute. Thanks. You guys are so kind. I really do appreciate it. You guys are always very tolerant to put up with my little idiosyncrasies. So thanks. It makes me feel appreciated and a little bit less stressed out. So in any case, Let me get to these other Asshai quotes. There's 2 more, and then we'll talk about it in more detail. And finally, the bird has chilled out. Finally.
Despite its forbidding aspects, Asshai by the Shadow has for many centuries been a thriving port where ships from all over the known world come to trade, crossing vast and stormy seas. Most arrive laden with foodstuffs and wine, for beyond the walls of Asshai little grows save ghost grass, whose glassy, glowing stalks are inedible. If not for the food brought in from across the sea, the Asshai would have starved. The ships bring casks of fresh water, too. The waters of the ash glisten black beneath the noonday sun and glimmer with a pale green phosphorescence by night. And such fish as swim in the river are blind and twisted, so deformed and hideous to look upon that only fools and shadowbinders will eat of their flesh. Every land beneath the sun has need of fruits and grains and vegetables, so one might ask why any mariner would sail to the ends of the earth when he might more easily sell his cargo to markets closer to home. The answer is gold. Beyond the walls of Asshai, food is scarce, but gold and gems are common, though some will say that the gold of the Shadowlands is as unhealthy in its own way as the fruits that grow there.
Oh no, I'm not doing that again. I got it this time. Got it. Save your comments. In any case, there was a couple of new pieces in that one. Actually, no, those were the same pieces. I've got a couple new ones in the third one. So yeah, same Asshai stuff there. Yeah, calm down. I got it. Adam Wolford chimes in. The black oily stone is an evil version of the black monolith from 2001 Space Odyssey, where the monolith is pushing life forward and the oily black stone is pushing life away and keeping it down. That's interesting commentary. You also think of like the lighthouse, the Hightower lighthouse as well. But yeah, I mean, you start picturing Stygi, like what's at Stygi? Like, you know, some so awful stuff, you know, horrific statues, a nice black monolith would look great there. Perhaps it's just the big meteorite sitting in the middle of a shrine. That's kind of what I picture. Maybe some shade of the evening trees if you want to throw those in. So, and shout out to Crowfood's daughter, by the way. There's a YouTube channel called The Disputed Lands that does great work. She has an alternate theory, which I favor my theory, but like her theory and think it's realistic. And she associates the oily black stone with the shade of the evening trees. She talks about them as petrified shade of the evening trees. We know the weirwoods turn to pale stone when they petrify after hundreds of years. So perhaps the shade of the evening trees turn to oily black stone. The shade of the evening drink is described as oily and it's black. So pretty good theory, very good theory. And this is, like I said, a kind of mystery that I don't think there's going to be a definitive answer to, or at least not yet. So definitely check out The Disputed Lands and her shade of the evening oily black stone theory. So that's just worth a hat tip there. And thank you, Adam, for that super chat. Here's another one. House Blackfire. Let's see. There are truths in this world that are not taught at Old Town. Yeah, Melisandre to Crescent. That is a good line. A very good line. The ironic thing is that if you go to Old Town and you go to the right little sailors' temples, you'll find some Starry Wisdom cultists. And if you go to the very top of the High Tower in the upper ranks of the Citadel, you might find some more Starry Wisdom cultists. So, like Marwyn the Mage. And again, if you want the full Starry Wisdom rundown, check out the Great Empire of the Dawn live stream called Church of Starry Wisdom. So then, yeah, Lazara, this is a good point. People have proposed this. If Asshai is the capital of the Great Empire of the Dawn, then Stygi would be like the imperial palace, perhaps like a religious palace. You know, we're definitely talking about god kings and stuff like that. So this could either be an imperial palace, or it could just be a place they go to perform important rituals, you know, like the Oracle of Delphi or something. That's kind of what I think of it as. And this would explain why it's scarier than Asshai. Well, it's scarier because there's worse magic. It's the epicenter of whatever magic is happening in the Shadowlands, and that's actually kind of the thing I want to talk about here. So let's do this last Asshai quote, which has the Stygi bit. Is Leighton Hightower a Starry Wisdom cultist? That would be funny if he just welcomed Euron and they were like actually like boys, but I don't think so. I think Leighton is definitely going to be opposing Euron, but Leighton could have magic, as we discussed, as Quinn and I discussed in our Winds of Winter preview series about the Hightower. So let's cue up this last Asshai quote reading. And this one, by the way, is going to feature a sneak preview of some new Unseen Westeros art of the Shadowbinders.
Most sinister of all the sorcerers of Asshai are the Shadowbinders, whose lacquered masks hide their faces from the eyes of gods and men. They alone dare to go upriver past the walls of Asshai into the heart of darkness. On its way from the mountains of the Morn to the sea, the ash runs howling through a narrow cleft in the mountains, between towering cliffs so steep and close that the river is perpetually in shadow, save for a few moments at midday when the sun is at its zenith. In the caves that pockmark the cliffs, demons and dragons and worse make their lairs. The farther from the city one goes, the more hideous and twisted these creatures become, until at last one stands before the doors of Stygi, the corpse city at the Shadow's heart, where even the Shadowbinders fear to tread, or so the stories say.
Or so the stories say. So there's some good art there. Obviously, killer stuff. That was almost all Unseen Westeros. The blue and white and black Stygi was Dziga Kaiser, and the one with the phosphorescent green river ash actually is also Dziga Kaiser. Now that I think about it, then there was Enrique Murguia's Stygi as well. So great stuff from Unseen Westeros. Thank you so much, artists, for rendering these horrific places from out of George's imagination and onto the page. Pretty great stuff. Yeah, and I'm even not muted. So also the bird not muted. Anyway, so Stygi. What is that Stygi? Fun to speculate about, fun to ask. The point is that it's the epicenter. It's the worst place. So whatever shadow permeates the Shadowlands, like I said, if all of, you know, it's emanating from Stygi. It's funny, as soon as I talk about Stygi, Quinn walks in the house. What is this? You know, speak of the Lovecraftian God Emperor and he shall appear, right? In any case. Thanks for dropping in the chat, buddy. That was cool. Minty green. Like that shirt. That's good. So, like I said, to me, the oily black stone, it would be cool if the oily black stone was just straight up meteorite stone. However, that's unlikely for a couple reasons. One, there is too much of it. Asshai is a huge city. As you as you heard, it's bigger than all the other cities in the world. So not only is that a lot of oily black stone to quarry and build, when it's like obviously toxic to handle and be around, it's also just, as I mentioned in the Great Empire of the Dawn video, kind of counterintuitive. Why would you build a city so large out of this toxic stone? The only way that would happen is if it was literally built by frigging squishers, or it was entirely like the entire Great Empire of the Dawn royalty were all Shadowbinders and magical beings who like were. That's not very likely. So unless the squishers built Asshai and then the Great Empire of the Dawn took it over, my theory is that the Great Empire of the Dawn, the largest city in the history of the world, which basically our version of Atlantis, only it's only half submerged, was built, you know, in the glory days of the Great Empire of the Dawn, when the Shadowlands was a nice place to live. And again, I explained all this in the video, but like, you don't build a huge city at the end of a peninsula where no food grows. You build a huge city in a prosperous place. And the thing is, if you imagine the Shadow, whatever's happened to Asshai as a disaster, something that happened, then that means before it happened, it probably was a normal place. And the end of a peninsula is a great place for trade to be. Kind of like Karth, you're controlling the straits, you're controlling the trade. Saffron is the most valuable spice in A Song of Ice and Fire, it's pointed out. So Saffron Straits, that means saffron is probably flowing through there. Perhaps it's just named because it looks gold in the morning sun, but probably saffron flows through there, which means this is a rich port city. And again, a giant city, probably built out of glorious white stone to begin with. And then you look at Stygi, and it seems that something evil is emanating out from Stygi. So, in my opinions, since it's both the stone of Asshai and the actual Shadowlands, which seem to be all poisoned together, it's all toxic. The river is toxic. The ghost grass is freaky deaky. It seems like everything is poisoned. It's not just the stone, and it's not the city of Asshai that's poisoning everything. It's emanating from Stygi. So to me, that's what we have to start with explaining the theory with. Again, what I think is the biggest moon meteor essentially landed at Stygi in the Shadowlands. It's up there in the mountains, and that is what is poisoning the entire land. It is creating oily black stone. All of the other oily black stone is either quarried from Asshai, or it could be that smaller meteors, one landed, like I said, in Sithorios, maybe on the Toad Island or in the jungle, and that was what was used to make the stone over there, probably by the same people. But likely, I think it was all mined from Asshai, and that means that the Seastone Chair possibly could have been imported from Asshai by the Great Empire of the Dawn, by the Bloodstone Emperor. That is not impossible at all. If it has magical properties, then maybe he brought it over as his throne. It could have been carved in a different shape before it was recarved into a kraken. Also, that's another thing. We don't know when it was carved. The Sphinx was recarved, for example. So perhaps George is thinking of that. So these are some of my initial ideas about how it could be related to meteorites. And the other thing I want to mention is, again, when a meteor or a comet is plummeting to Earth, it pushes a wave of superheated and compressed air ahead of it. Thousands, over 1,000 degrees hot. Definitely hot enough to vitrify stone. And vitrify means melt and burn, basically. And it specifically with quartz stone has a way of burning and melting that makes it look kind of slick. And I've got some examples here. Three that I'll open up and share, so you guys can see what it looks like. See if I can blow this up a little. There we go. So this is a more greenish looking one, vitrified. You can definitely see it's got that wet sheen, and it's kind of got that oily look because of the green. So this could be an answer here. Here is. I apologize for not knowing where this is from in the world, but these are obviously steps, some sort of carved steps that were then vitrified and burnt. And you can see it has a melted, shiny look to it. And thank you, Daniel. I think I missed a couple super chats. Shit, too. Harrison, another one. Do you have to put a sock on the door to let the others know that it's... Oh, man, if I could only... let my birds know that it's live stream time somehow. And then Didelphi, that was the other one. If no one goes to Stygi, then who tells all those stories about it? Well, the people that live near it. If there's a unholy temple at the top of the mountain, the people that live at the bottom of the mountain are going to talk about it. And there's all sorts of lore, in Asshai and old places like Yeen and Karth that have memories of this stuff, that all that information's gotten passed around by the maesters. So that's where the sort of collective knowledge comes from, is old myths and legends, which are from Asshai. Oh, Highland Chicken. Have I read any of the Thousand Worlds? There are many things, example, telepathic pyramids, which are both similar to oily black stone and the Weirwoods. I'm well familiar that Martin does develop a lot of his ideas in his short stories that ended up in A Song of Ice and Fire in a different form. I've read a little bit, not a ton. I know I need to catch up. There's definitely going to be some evidence in there for some of the main A Song of Ice and Fire theories. Lonely Songs of Larendor has a lot of good comet symbolism And there's definitely some other stuff that we've talked about before. But which one are you talking about with the pyramids? That sounds interesting. So then catching up. Okay, cool. So one more vitrified stone picture. There's a few of them together. So, and you can see it looks melted. It looks, if the stone's black to begin with and then it gets vitrified, it's going to look like oily black stone. So, like I said, the fact that the meteors push this wave of superheated air in front of it means that some of that melting could have been the result of that. The thing is, though, that here's the problem with the vitrification. Vitrification only affects the outside layer of the stone. So once you quarry it, the fresh cut faces would not look oily. And Yeen is obviously quarried. So unless it was quarried and built and then vitrified, the thing is when a stone is vitrified, it's only going to be certain surfaces. It's not going to be evenly done, and it's not going to, you know what I'm saying? So to me, the vitrification is something that Martin is like thinking about as an inspiration, but I don't think that explains it because, again, a lot of the stuff is quarried and built. It's not like the fused stone where we don't see any joints or seams. It's not described that way. So the thing about Asshai that I also will point out is, of course, my theory is that, and Tim, by the way, I got your super chats, and I'm going to pop open all the super chats in just a second because they're kind of topical to what we're talking about right now. Like I said, my theory is that Asshai is built by the Great Empire of the Dawn, who were Dragon Lords, or at least the Dragon Lords lived there, if not built it. And so now we have Dragon Lords and oily black stone kind of in the same place. So this raises the possibility, was the oily black stone created with dragon fire also? Maybe it's just darker sorcery that leaves it toxic, where the fused stone isn't. The fact that the oily stone looks like a vitrified stone and the Valyrian fused stone basically is vitrified stone in a sense. Like you imagine the Valyrian stone looking a little bit shiny if it's molten, heated, and then sealed off by magic. It probably has a nice, slick, hard look to it. It's hard to say, but and yeah, don't read any innuendo into what I'm saying here. We're talking about stone and rock. Hard stone. That's all. In any case, where was I? Getting a drink, wetting my whistle. And I'm glad you guys like my road paving dragons theory. Let's go ahead and pop open the PayPals because there are some good stuff here on topic. So first of all, it was somebody's birthday. Jesse. Birthday is today, so happy birthday. He sent in 1919. Jesse, are you 19? Whatever birthday it is, happy birthday. Then we got Tim Kelly. Thank you. I appreciate that, Minty, promising not to read any innuendo, and all of you giving similar oaths of good behavior. Appreciate that. So Grey Waste Tim sent me two. Good ones, both. Which direction do you think the Great Empire of the Dawn people traveled to Westeros? Did they go west? I mean, traveling over the Bone Mountains and from the Dothraki Sea to the Narrow Sea? That seems like an incredibly long distance to travel, even for dragon riders. Going east over the Grey Waste and the Sunset Sea might actually be quicker. So, although there's a limit to how much scientific thinking we can apply to the Song of Ice and Fire, people have worked out that from what we can see of the map and where the equator appears to be, we're seeing about half of the world. So whether you go east from Asshai or west, it's probably a similar distance. So it's really about what's in between. We have no idea what lands are in between Asshai and the west coast of Westeros. Perhaps there's whole continents to work around. Perhaps it's just a big Pacific Ocean type of open gap. Pacific Ocean is big. So it could be that. But it appears to be the same distance. And the way that I picture it is mostly a naval migration. The Great Empire of the Dawn seems to have been a maritime power because they conquered Lang. And Lang is an island nation. So that means the Great Emperor of the Dawn had maritime power. And I think that makes sense anyway. And so it's probably they came to Battle Isle by dragon and by boat. And the dragons can take pit stops anywhere and fly a very long distance. So I don't think that's really an obstacle. However, of course, we know that Alyssa Farman and Sunchaser, well, not we know, but it seems likely that Alyssa Farman and Sunchaser did make it sailing west from Westeros, west and a little bit south, all the way to Asshai, so that Alyssa Farman could become Quaithe, perhaps. So it does seem that we can get around that way, and it's very possible that the Great Empire of the Dawn came that way. That could be why they landed in Starfall, Old Town, and maybe the Iron Islands, which are all on the west coast of Westeros. However, before the Long Night and before the Hammer of the Waters, the Arm of Dorne was not broken, which means you couldn't access the east coast of Westeros. And we know that Dorne doesn't have good harbors, or at least it doesn't now. We can't assume that was the case, but it could be that they sailed on past Dorne and came to Starfall, and then, I'm sorry, my map is backwards. If this is Westeros and they're sailing here, they could have Starfall and then Old Town and then, the Iron Islands that way. So they're both plausible options, and they're, I didn't have any bird shit on my shirt, did I, when I turned around? No? Okay. Half the time I do. So yeah, good question, Tim. And I'm pretty sure Martin wants us to wonder about it, because we don't find Great Empire of the Dawn civilizations all the way across the Sunset Sea. It's really just Valyria and maybe Karth that seem to have those traces. But actually, that could be enough, really. If Valyria and Karth have Great Empire of the Dawn ancestry, that could be a clue that they were sailing across the Sunset Sea there. Also, if the Isle of Toads and Yeen and all that shit is connected to the Great Empire of the Dawn, then that would imply that they were familiar with the Sunset Sea as well. So I would have to say that that's probably more likely. Do you think the Great Empire of the Dawn was the most powerful civilization ever? Essentially, yes. It does appear that way. Although Valyria obviously could make an argument as well. Valyria seems to have been more aggressive from what we can tell. 5,000 years of slavery and genocide. But it'd be one of those two, obviously. The ones that have dragons, not coincidentally, because, dragons help you become a powerful empire. So, all right, next one from Grey Waste Tim. Is it possible the Far East had its own Hammer of the Waters moment? The Stepstones are remnants of the Arm of Dorne, and off the west coast of Mosavie are the Thousand Islands, which are said to be the remains of a drowned kingdom. Perhaps to the east, where the map cuts off, are the remains of a far north, far east connection. I tend to think about the Bering Strait separating Alaska from Far East Russia. Yeah, it could be. That's not impossible. Martin has speculated about a northern passage. He said that people have tried to find it by sailing through the Shivering Sea. So there could be something like that. Some people have tried to wrap Essos around and just make it turn into Westeros. That doesn't really work for me. But when you talk about, sort of going more around, like Russia to the Bering Strait kind of a thing, there could be a connection up there somewhere. And perhaps the demons of the Lion of Night are the others. They come down from the north and affect Essos too. We know the Long Night happens around the world, so perhaps the others happen around the world. It's definitely possible. The Thousand Islands doesn't have obvious evidence of impacts. Like, there's not collapsed shit. So it could just be the water levels rising. There are carved statue faces just under the waterline that are visible during low tide. But it is hard to say. Could be. It's definitely possible, Tim. And obviously, if there are multiple meteor impacts, then there could be multiple earthquakes and other sort of high impact zones. So it definitely is a plausible theory. Yes, could the magic of Stygi and the Heart of Winter be two sides of the same coin? There might not even be two sides of the same coin. Sorry, Liz, let me put that back up there. I've also speculated that we could find an oily black stone in the Heart of Winter because Azor Ahai became Night's King, it appears. And all that dragon shit ended up in the north, as we know from the dragon steel of The Last Hero, and the presence of all these Targaryens at the wall here at the end of the story strongly implies there were dragons there the first time around. So there could be a fused stone wall under the ice wall. That's a favorite theory of mine that I like, or not of mine, but of the old Westeros forums. Sort of one of the ideas got kicked around after the World of Ice and Fire came out. Could be oily stone or fused stone under the wall. And in the heart of winter, there definitely could be oily black stone. I actually kind of lost my shit a little bit when the TV show depicted these dark stone obelisks around a weirwood tree where a Night King was created that eventually turned into what could have been the heart of winter. Seemingly the center of the other's power was that frozen weirwood tree. So honestly, I couldn't think of a better thing to find in the heart of winter than a frozen weirwood tree and some oily black stone obelisks. So Stygi and the heart of winter could absolutely be very similar things going on. And there definitely could be magical poisoning happening from the heart of winter. The haunted forest obviously is very haunted, and it gets harder and harder to find game as you go north. Maybe that's just because it's far north, but maybe if we go far enough, we're going to find, you know, some toxic stuff. And it's all covered in ice, so we can't see what color anything is under that. Good question. What does the spiral mean? Yeah. Well, it means a lot of things, but not in a Game of Thrones. Doesn't mean anything in a Game of Thrones. Cinnabar Tab says, why would Yeen, which the stone is so similar to Asshai, be so far, since Asshai appears to be the epicenter for a catastrophic event? Definitely agree with your idea that George is placing these old civilizations all over the place. Moat Cailin may not be related to the Great Empire of the Dawn, but it was highly advanced for its time. Where I work as a geologist, the basalt is the worst rock. It's super heavy and also absolute pain. Yeah, it's hard to carve too. Let's see, which is why I think they had to be advanced. Definitely so. Just like the ancient Egyptians. I think that's what George is implying. They chose a strategic location and put a big castle right in the middle. Also, loving the spooky recorded video inserts. Very good. Glad you guys are enjoying that. And the upgrade to 1080 so we can get all the art coming through in top quality. So like I said, there's two possibilities. One, they literally quarried it from Asshai and brought it to Yeen for some magical purpose. But it's probably more likely that there's a meteor somewhere between the Basilisk Islands and Yeen that created enough oily stone for them to build it there. And that's I think, the most likely thing. Because we need to think about magic here. All of the geology and the science, these are only starting points for George to create magical stuff from. So they're only inspirations. We have to think about the magic as the most important thing. So when these moon meteors come down, we have to think about them as being full of magic, and specifically the kind of alien Lovecraft magic that we find in Lovecraft stories. You know, sometimes these beings come to Earth riding on the back of a meteorite or something like that. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure there's at least one story where that happens. So this could be the kind of thing where evil intelligence, or maybe just more nebulous evil magic, is coming along with these meteors. So everywhere that it lands, it's poisoning the land and perhaps creating oily black stone. The Basilisk Isles, I mean, it's just full of horror. There's all kinds of horrific stories. That's where the Valyrians went to create a slave colony, Gagassos, where they mated humans and animals together with sorcery and created abominations and stuff. So perhaps they went there because, like Asshai, the oily black stone in the basilisks enabled some sort of dark magic. Maybe there was enough of it to power the dark magic. So that could be why they went there. So I tend to think, like I said, anywhere the meteor falls, it could potentially create oily black stone. That means that on the stepstones, under the water somewhere, is a bunch of oily black stone on the seabed. And that's why the squishers are so mean. It's because there's an underwater squisher temple made of oily black stone in the stepstones there. And that is why the squishers are mean. So I'm tossing out all kinds of extra theories today. Harangan Mind, my geologist friend, says, do you think, one of my geologist friends, it turns out, do you think the five forts were along an ice wall that has melted? It would explain them being in a straight line. You know, that's a theory I've never heard or thought of. is that perhaps they were like the forts on the wall, right? If you think about the wall, we've got these black fortresses spaced out and then an ice wall in between. So maybe during colder times, there was originally an ice wall there. That's not crazy. Definitely, the five forts are serving a similar purpose to the wall. So that's not a crazy idea. In fact, if you really want to go tinfoil, the Night's Watch vows, okay, the idea that Night's King was the 13th Lord Commander of the Watch is the reason why most people think Night King lived after the Long Night. I'm almost positive, I am positive, that Night King and Queen lived during the Long Night, and they were the first creators of the others. And that 13th Lord Commander thing, there's some trick to it. All right, 12 Lord Commanders died during the Long Night, or the Night's Watch could have been formed from a previously existent honor guard, like the King's Guard, that then became the Night's Watch. And the 13th Commander just happened to be the first Night's Watch commander, but there were 12 commanders of whatever it was before. So maybe that's tied to the five forts in the Great Empire of the Dawn, but that's the purest speculation, and so we must dismiss it. Tough. Maester. Anyways, Didelphi says, how far apart from each other are the five forts? Hard to say. If you look at the map, it looks like a goodly distance, but it's definitely not close. It could be similar to the length of the wall, I think. Going back for a super chat that I may have missed. Yes. If Westeros, Essos, and Sothorios mean Western, Eastern, and Southern land, is there an unknown Nothorios far in the Shivering Sea? Well, I think it's the lands of always winter, really. I mean, if you look at the Shivering Sea, it's parallel to like Moat Cailin. So everything in northern Westeros is farther north of anything in Essos. So by the time you cross the wall and get into Bloodraven's Cave territory, you're inside the Arctic Circle at that point. So that is Nothorios. That's it. We just don't know how much land, because of course on Earth we have a landmass at the South Pole, Antarctica, but not at the North Pole. The North Pole is just ice. Not necessarily the case in Westeros. Maybe Westeros keeps going all the way to the North Pole and there's more land up there. In fact, I would say that kind of has to be the case, because the heart of winter should be the North Pole, which makes the others like a really twisted kind of Santa Claus elves. Is that what's going on? Is the Night King Santa Claus? Satan Claus. Well, of course, Santa Claus comes from Cernunnos and Green Man folklore, the same place the devil comes from. So maybe that's the idea. But the curtain of light that Bran sees past in order to see the heart of winter is obviously the Aurora Borealis. And so the heart of winter is almost assuredly the North Pole. So yeah, I would say that Westeros has to go up that far. Very cool. So then let's see here. Sean Carson sent me a PayPal from Big Baby Jesus because I played some ODB on my Instagram feed. By the way, follow me on Instagram, David Lightbringer on Instagram. I'm going to go get Cleo. Hang on a second, guys. Okay, so there will be a certain amount of distant bird screaming for the rest, but this one is quiet at least. So, and thank you. Yes, over on Instagram, that's me at David Lightbringer. Oh, you look good with this high contrast, girl. You look good against the black. Oh, yes. Are you pleased with yourself, girl? Very pleased with herself. Thank you, Be Well from Two Ravens. I think now I have bird shit on the back of my shoulder. Anyways. Do you think it's possible a meteor fell in the north and that the debris caused a long night in Westeros where it landed was called Winterfell. Okay. So there could be meteors that, okay, so we know a meteor landed, not we know, but Hammer of the Waters is basically second place after Stygi for most likely meteor impact location. Isn't that right, girl? Yes, it is. So, but after the Stepstones and the Arm of Dorne, there's a couple other possibilities. The Isle of Faces looks like a crater lake. The problem with that is that I think the Isle of Faces existed before the Long Night, and if that is a crater island and created by the meteors, then I'm not sure why there would be a ton of weirwoods on there. Maybe there's been enough time to plant weirwoods on it. It's also possible that the weirwoods are neutralizing the magic of the black meteors. And let me actually talk about this. This is not as crazy as it sounds at first. The weirwoods have grave worm symbolism. The roots of the weirwoods are described as grave worms a couple of times in the brand chapters. Grave worms eat up corruption. That's what they do. Okay, they eat rotten flesh, and the weirwoods also kind of do that. They're chewing up Bloodraven. Bloodraven himself is a black dragon. He's a Targaryen who's dressed all in black. The Night's Watch is said to have black blood. And black blood is an important symbol having to do with fire transformation and stuff like that. Beric has black blood. Melisandre, demons, Balerion the Black Dread, and Drogon have black blood. So the very symbol of a black dragon like Bloodraven with black blood sitting below the root zone of the weirwoods, being consumed by the graveworm-like roots of the weirwoods, could imply that the weirwoods are able to neutralize the poison of the toxic meteors. And so if there is a meteor that struck Westeros and created the Isle of Faces, which looks like a crater lake, although crater lakes take much longer than that to form, George could be playing fast and loose with the geology. Shout out to An American Thinks, who made a video about the Isle of Faces being a crater lake many years ago. It's possible that there is a meteor at the center of the Isle of Faces, and that the Green Men went and planted a whole rack of weirwoods there to neutralize the magic so that Westeros didn't turn into the Shadowlands. I wouldn't call it likely, but it kind of makes sense. It could be true. So when we go to the Isle of Faces, we could see black, oily stone as well as weirwood trees. And if that will be my theory. If we see black, oily stone on the Isle of Faces, I will tell you that it is in fact a crater lake and that the weirwoods are containing that poison magic. And that is why Westeros is not Stygi and the Shadowlands. So there could also be, and then, so to get to the question, there could also be one in the heart of winter. That could be what is even animating the others. That could be what is enabling the magic of creating the white shadows. That could be part of it. Another symbolic parallel, Azor Ahai invades the weirwood net. And he is like a poison invasion of the weirwood net. The meteors and Azor Ahai are parallel symbols. So Azor Ahai invading the weirwood net is very similar to the idea of the poison magic of the oily black stone being neutralized by the weirwood trees. And then there's also the Grey King myth of the lightning bolt setting the tree ablaze. The burning tree is a symbol of a weirwood whose red leaves look like they're on fire. And the lightning bolt is a meteor symbol. So we've got this connection between the meteor strike and then the weirwood tree creation. And this is how man possesses the fire of the gods, right? So again, it could be that the weirwoods were permanently altered or poisoned by the black stone that landed. The meteor that landed on the Isle of Faces or the Heart of Winter could have permanently altered the weirwoods and made them all white and shit. That's in play as well. So there's a lot of things that George could do with this. And since we should see the Isle of Faces and the Heart of Winter before the end, we could get some of these answers. Let's see, I read that one already. Yeah, Cleo's like sort of like an anger translator. When I wave my hands, yeah, she translates it into bird motion. If extreme heat causes vitrification, maybe the oily black stone is made by dragon fire, maybe an early attempt at fused stone. Could be, definitely could be. The thing is that we have to account for the difference in magic. None of the fused stone is ever described as being magically toxic, right? Like dragonstone isn't, the plants don't like not grow near the fused stone. There's no hints of toxicness around the fused stone. So there's some important difference with the oily stone. Dragons could be involved, and perhaps the Bloodstone Emperor had a darker level of sorcery, but the elephant in the room is begging the question, could Starfall be a black stone fortress? We know so little about it. That could be. The idea that Dawn is made from a pale meteor, that could be a supposition based on Dawn looking like a pale sword. Meteorites are often dark in color, but when you melt down and refine the metal, it's still going to come out shiny silver. So it could be that Dawn was made from a black stone, and that the belief that it was made from a white stone is actually, again, a supposition after the fact. It's more likely, though, that we do have some kind of white meteor that's the opposite of the black meteor. Maybe a piece of the comet or something else. Oh, that's another thing. Comets are oily black stones. This is something I learned later in my research. But comets basically are mostly composed of frozen space rock and dirt. There's usually some rare minerals in there, rare metals. There are nickel, phosphorus, things like that. Mostly iron, though. And the thing is that as these frozen balls of rock and dirt jettison through space, the incredible heat that builds up on the surface of it melts and like burns and creates this stuff on the surface of comets, which is called space goo. And it's literally a black tar-like substance that ends up forming on the exterior of these comets. So comets literally are ice dragons. They're made of ice and they're made of metal. So they're ice swords and ice dragons that are coated in black oil or black tar. So all of the stuff, the oily black stone, it's got a lot of comet ideas sort of built into it, just right off the bat. And then when you start talking about making black swords, this is an extension of the same symbolism. And it's even possible that the missing ingredient in Valyrian steel is oily black stone. Here's another free sort of more tinfoil theory for you. Nobody can recreate Valyrian steel. People can rework it. The cohort smiths can rework it, but nobody can recreate it. And it could be because the missing ingredient is not only dragonfire, but actually oily black stone, which has magical properties. And the big clue about this would be Ned's ice. When Ned's ice is melted down, it turns into two swords, which are colored black and red. And when Tyrion describes the waves of black, he says that they appear to drink the light, drink the sunlight. So it could be that this, and that's the key phrase about Asshai, right? It drinks the sunlight. So it could be that the Valyrian steel has some of that same magic of the oily black stone, and that's why it's a sun-drinking, light-drinking element. That's why the Valyrian steel swords are kind of evil and sorcerous. They might be doing an Elric thing where they're drinking people's souls and stuff like that. Because remember, the ancient Ironborn are said to have possessed black weapons which drank the souls of those they slew. It could just be that these were the earliest iron weapons, because the Iron Islands have iron, and that because the iron weapons were superior to bronze, they were ascribed magical qualities, durka, durka, durka. But it could be that the Ironborn were carving weapons off of the Seastone Chair or using oily black stone to create magical weapons, which actually did drink souls and perform dark magic. Because remember, Lightbringer drinks Nissa Nissa's soul. That's what it says. Her blood and her spirit and strength and steel went into the, and her courage went into the steel. So Lightbringer is sucking up Nissa Nissa's vitality and spirit energy to become a magic sword. So there's a little bit of a commonality between all of this stuff. Hang on a quick second, guys. Needed a freshie. Sorry there. A lot of talking today. Okay, so the other part of that oily blackstone Valyrian steel thing is that wait, what is this? Oh, it's a Cleo. It's a Cleo dander fluff. It's not toilet paper, guys. It's a Cleo fluff. You want that back, girl? Okay. Cleo's feathers are very downy soft, and the under feathers are like they're like cotton. You can just like twirl it up and it's like cotton. So I sometimes have them in my beard anyways. At least it's not like soup or something. Okay, so let me pull this one off the screen here and see if I didn't miss any super chats. I think I'm up to speed. Yes. Excellent. And let's go ahead and check on my PayPals, make sure I'm up there. It looks like I'm good. Okay. So Harangan Mind sent me some more information about oh, sorry. I'm just looking for the right email. Okay, so here's some some interesting stuff that George may have been drawing on when he was thinking of all this stuff. I found this to be pretty cool. So thanks again to Harangan Mind for this stuff. He says, vitrification, which basically turns silica stone to glass, because again, volcanic rock, silicate rock, means it has a lot of quartz. And so that's how you can make glass. It's from that quartz. So vitrification happens around 2100 degrees Fahrenheit for most granite type stones. In the case of the Seastone Chair, there's a real type of stone that is oily and black, carves beautifully, and washes up on the coast of Scotland in large chunks from time to time. It occurs in a seam that runs deep under the sea offshore. Pieces break off, and due to its low specific gravity, the stone is washed about until it's brought ashore on a tide. The stone is known as sea coal, and it was ascribed many magical origins and properties by the ancient Scots. Just as the undersea seam ran ashore, it may be that the Seastone Chair's seam ran ashore at Battle Isle. What better place to build a lighthouse than right on top of a coal mine? Now, I must say, let's see here. And again, this is the kind of thing where, you know, again, George could be cobbling together different influences to create a thing. That's usually what he does. So that's a pretty interesting factoid, just if nothing else. But it just goes to show you that, like, strange stone is usually ascribed to magical qualities anyway. So in A Song of Ice and Fire, it actually is magic. And then let's see here. Let's see. He's mentioning that Asshai has a lot of. He's talking about the mining that's going on there, right? So it was, and perhaps still is, likely to be an immensely active hydrothermal hotspot because gold, silver, and gemstones are commonly found in hills of the Shadowlands, and those are things that form in hydrothermal conditions. So I have speculated, I made this point in the Great Empire of the Dawn video, that another piece of evidence that there are dragon lords here is that this seems to be a volcanic area, or at least a hydrothermally active area like Winterfell. We know that dragons like to roost and grow in such places, and perhaps are native to such places. So the idea that there's volcanic activity up in the Shadowlands near Stygi makes a lot of sense. That's why demons and dragons would make their lairs in the caves that pockmark the hills. That, by the way, sounds a lot like Hardhome. So these could be volcanic vent caves. That probably are. And that fits the idea of maybe black basalt, which is a silicate rock, being the oily stone, right? Or being similar to it, or the oily stone starts off as black basalt. That fits with a volcanic area like that, a hydrothermally active area. So he's asking the question, were they mining other things there? And I'm saying that the oily black stone is what could have been mined there and brought elsewhere. So again, the most likely scenario to me is a magical meteor and or a magical ceremony performed in the heart of Stygi, in the heart of Shadow. And this magic is basically transforming the entire Shadowlands. And that's the way it looks on the map, right? So this is the epicenter of the dark magic. But sure, if you wanted to, why couldn't you quarry some oily stone from Asshai and bring it somewhere else and make a throne out of it, or a Yeen out of it if you want? How long has my mic been muted for? Not long, it looks like. Okay, cool. I'm only seeing one mute complaint. So, what was I saying? Okay, so the next point, last point, has to do with symbolism. What are the oily stones? Well, I think we're supposed to associate them with the idea of bloodstone. I'm petting Cleo, by the way. So we got this guy named the Bloodstone Emperor. He kills the Amethyst Empress, the rightful ruler of the Great Empire of the Dawn. He kills her probably in an act of evil magic because he's associated with dark sorcery. Somehow it's so evil that it causes the long night. Well, of course, part of my very first theory is that Bloodstone Emperor murdering Amethyst Empress, causing the long night, is just another version of Azor Ahai murdering Nissa Nissa, which cracked the moon, because the moon cracking is the cause of the long night. So Azor Ahai is the Bloodstone Emperor. That's why the second episode of the Bloodstone Compendium is called The Bloodstone Emperor Azor Ahai. Same dude. And so the Bloodstone Emperor was said to worship a black stone that fell from outer space, right? That strongly implies that it's a magical black stone. This is the guy that's ruling in Asshai. He's also founding the Church of Starry Wisdom, which is directly a Lovecraft thing. So seems very likely that the black stone the Bloodstone Emperor worshipped was a meteor, or perhaps the meteor. So again, picture Stygi as like a temple built around a giant oily black stone meteor, or some god-awful radiating phosphorescent green meteor for all we know. This is the black stone that the Bloodstone Emperor worshipped. So the thing about bloodstone, and I went way too deep on this in the Bloodstone Compendium, admittedly. Bloodstone is a very interesting stone. It has a lot of mythical associations, and I'll grab us some bloodstone here. Now that we're in 1080p, you should be able to see this in better detail. You can see the splotchy redness here. It's like literally so hard to get it to focus. I got to hide my face so that it doesn't focus on my face. And then, let's see, here's the best one. You could see how blotchy it is. And so the belief about it, it's very dark green chalcedony with these iron inclusions, which give you the red spots. And so the belief about bloodstone is that there was green chalcedony at the foot of the cross. And when Jesus was crucified, some of his divine blood dripped onto the bloodstone. And so the bloodstone has magical powers because it's Jesus's blood on the stone, right? So if you think about this, Nissa Nissa is the Jesus sacrifice of A Song of Ice and Fire. She is sacrificed supposedly to create Lightbringer, which saves humanity. and she lays her own life down willingly, like Jesus, at least in the one reading of the story. The thing is, Nissa is directly analogous to the moon, which cracked open and gave birth to dragons. That's why Daenerys, as a Nissa character, also gives birth to dragons, like the moon. And so, the idea that the moon blows up from a comet impact and that these oily black stones can be thought of as bloodstones sort of implies basically the blood of the great moon goddess, if you will. And remember, the meteors are called bleeding stars. So George specifically wants us to think about comets and meteors as bleeding stars coming from a broken moon, the sky being filled with essentially bleeding stars and symbolic moon blood. And that's why Bloodstone Compendium 3 is Waves of Night and Moon Blood. It's because we're supposed to see the moon as like a sacrificed woman or a woman giving birth. And so there's moon blood or birthing blood, bleeding stars, dragon children. It's very messy, gory symbolism, but that's childbirth for you. Honestly, I think it's really cool that George thought about childbirth and reproduction in this level of detail and didn't spare us the blood, because that's obviously part of it. So shout out to all you witchy blood magic friends of mine and your altars and your triple goddesses and your rituals and your eclipses and your eclipse magic. Shout out to all of you. In any case, so the bloodstone, George could be working with this idea. He's working with a lot of blood magic. These moon rocks are the sacrificed body of a moon goddess, essentially. So when the Bloodstone Emperor worships a black stone, which is a piece of the moon, I think we can think of this black oil as black blood. That's the point. All of the fire transformed people and dragons have the black burning blood. So this oily black stone being thought of as bloodstone, at least symbolically, to me, like the oil is the burnt blood. That's like, at least symbolically anyways. I went into this in more detail in Bloodstone Compendium 2, if you want the full breakdown. I bounced off of a few different things. There's more to it than that, but that's the quick summary. And with that, I will open it up for final questions before we wrap it up and go take care of all this bird screaming, of which there is lots. So yeah, fire away, guys. Any final questions? And yeah, again, if the Waves of Night and Moonblood episode is like 2 hours, and there's good Sansa symbolism that when Sansa gets her first period in King's Landing and tries to burn her bed, and it's a ton of moon symbolism. There's burning blood and eclipse and smoke darkening the skies and all this stuff. It's a great scene. It's funny and kind of obviously disturbing and sad a little bit because Sansa doesn't have the proper support of the women folk that someone should have during this very special time. And so she has a very traumatic experience, but it's kind of funny when she tries to burn the mattress, admittedly. So there's also a ton of symbolism going on there. So check out Waves of Night and Moonblood, Bloodstone Compendium. Number 3, it's like a 6-year-old podcast at this point. And it might surprise you at like how much stuff was uncovered, all the way back at the beginning. Bloodstone Compendium 2. Of course, you can find all that at lucifermeanslightbringer.com as well as on the YouTube page. Gold is produced in supernova nucleosynthesis, Talk Studios says. It's my smart stoner friend, and from the collision of neutron stars, and was present in the dust from which the solar system formed. Well, that's really cool. I did not know that. Fun facts about gold. And by the way, this is my Russian meteorite pendant, of course. So I've got my own moon meteor action right here. Gold comes from space, he says. That's pretty cool. If you look at the area where the Great Empire of the Dawn used to be, there are several potential craters. Yeah, like the Bleeding Sea, Lost Empire of Harkoon that burnt up for some reason. There's a couple places like that in Essos. Yeah, totally. And yeah, shout out to the women exchanging birth stories and war stories. It's definitely an appropriate place for that. So thank you. I'm glad you feel comfortable to talk about things. I mean, that's the whole point of George putting all the symbolism in there, is because George believes in like every part of life being reflected in the story, and that includes the symbolism. So definitely can't get through the symbolism without making some crude jokes at different times. Harangan Mind says, could the psionic rubies be of cosmic origin? Where have you seen an impact scatter rubies before? Thanks for everything. Well, I think that those magic rubies could be the ones from Asshai. That does make sense. Maybe it's not just any ruby. Maybe it's the Shadowlands rubies that specifically have this magic. Because when Melisandre talks about weaving illusion, she mentions drawing somebody's shadow from like the bones. The Lord of Bones is bones. So there's that shadow language. She talks about weaving with light and shadow. So maybe that is Shadowlands magic. Right on. Thank you, Cam. Thank you, everyone else. I always love hanging out with you guys on Sunday. And looks like I'm all caught up on PayPal's. And yeah, so like I said, if there's any questions you couldn't get through, now's the time. Birth itself causes a crowning, as you probably, yep. Yeah, so that's the eclipse. The thing is, when the moon is impregnated by the comet, it's also covering up the sun, which creates the eclipse. Because remember, the moon wandered too close to the sun and then cracked open. So the eclipse ring is both, I think, like Barrick's, the strangle marks on Barrick are called a black ring around his neck. The black crown is an inversion of the solar crown of the sun. So a black crown basically implies a solar eclipse. And then, yes, the crowning also, of course, the dragons are born from this sun-moon alignment. So that's also the crowning of the womb. Yeah. Thanks for that extra layer of symbolism. So I will point out that right. So Valyria shows us that magical fallout zones are a thing. It's can't be too similar because obviously a volcano is different. But if they were channeling blood magic and that somehow exploded and reacted with magical fire, it is kind of similar. And we see that both Valyria and Asshai are magically toxic to this day. Maybe there's greasy black stone in Valyria, for all we know. Maybe Euron will tell us. Has Euron been to Stygi? Possibly so. If it was the Bloodstone Emperor's seat of power and he's trying to emulate him, could the Greyjoys have found something important there? Possibly so. I think this is absolutely in play. And I think that Euron does know secrets of the Great Empire of the Dawn. It's implied when he says he's seen gods, golden gods with gemstone eyes. And he calls Dany, he says that Dany has amethyst eyes twice. So I think that he is thinking about the Great Empire of the Dawn. And thus it could be that he's been to Stygi. Absolutely. And of course, he sits in the Seastone Chair at least sometimes, which is an oily black stone. And if there is a throne in Stygi, it's surely made out of oily black stone, right? So this art, he's set up as a bloodstone character for sure. Very possibly. Bloodstone Emperor and Amethyst Empress are brother and sister. And if they were Azor Ahai and Nissa Nissa, they very well may have had magical children because that's implied in that myth. So yeah, I do think that's possible. And I think the Amethyst Empress definitely has descendants. So Yeah, I think this is probably similar to like a Valyrian thing. All right, well, Cleo's now shit on the front of my shirt, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the stream. Thank you all for coming. For me to poop on, Cleo. Thanks, guys. Love you all. Thanks for the PayPals. Feel free to send those in during the week, by the way. It's always nice. Leave a comment on the way out. I have been Shadow.